Hello and welcome to Diarmaid Williams' Power Engineering International Google Hangout. This is our inaugural Hangout, and the theme of this particular Hangout is the global power generation mix. And what we want to establish here is we want to get every technology under the power generation umbrella to talk about where they envisage the power generation mix to be in over the next 50 years and beyond. And so over the coming weeks, we'll be talking to various people from the solar, nuclear, wind, and um, geothermal, possibly, power sectors, and also gas. But today we've got Mike Bostan from Euracoal to talk to us about how he sees what the vision for the coal industry is in terms of the European and global power generation scene. And obviously each professional from their own background, they'll probably have a little bias towards, or they'll have a big bias towards their own technology. But everyone can see the bigger picture too. So without further ado, I'm just going to ask Mike to talk about him. Hi, Mike.
Hi, I am Mike Boston. I'm the Public Affairs Manager from Euracoal, which is the European Association for Coal and Lignite, the voice of coal in Europe. We represent importers, producers, users, and also research centers. Thank you for inviting me for the Hangout. I think it's a very good initiative. And just say about a few words about the coal sector in the world and in Europe. In the world, the coal industry is doing all right. For example, last year, the most capacity for power plants was for coal, which is very good for us. In Europe, in some countries, improve demand, the larger the demand. In other countries, is a bit less. We have indeed a lot of issues that we have to resolve. There is a lot happening now in the energy sector, particularly in Europe, and we hope to have a very good discussion with policymakers and our partners from the energy sector. I think all fuels have a place in the energy mix. What is important is to provide the reliable electricity for consumers at affordable prices and protecting the environment. If you want to ask me any questions, or I can continue presenting the sector.
Yeah, I mean, well, what we want to get really is to get coal has done a lot of innovation over the last several years, and there's been an accelerated, I suppose, drive towards cleaner coal technology. And, I suppose what I'd like you to talk about is how you see the overall power generation mix in 50 years, possibly, if you can judge the rate of, I suppose, the rate of innovation that's going on now. I mean, in terms of timescales, what will the coal sector look like in 50 years, and how will it be contributing to the overall power generation mix?
What is special about the energy sector is that investment is very long term. For example, if you build a nuclear power plant or a coal-fired power plant, you build it having in mind 30, 40 years of using that power plant. So thinking about 2000 for 50 years ahead is actually not that far away. What is happening? Why I'm using this indicator? How much capacity is built right now? Because this shows what will happen in the next years. You don't build a gas-fired power plant or a coal-fired power plant and close it the next day or in 2 years. This is important. How will the energy mix look like? I think it will be more diverse. Now coal is the #1 fuel in the world. It's about 40% providing electricity. In Europe, it's about 28.6%. And I think that share maybe will decrease a bit, which is normal because there are new fuels in the market, and I think it's important for competition. What is not right is to ignore other fuels, or to ignore coal for the environment issues. I think what should be done is actually helping the environment and reducing CO2 emissions in an active way. So what we do in the coal fire sector is to invest in protecting the environment in the for the mining part, but also power plants. Um, Renewables are now a part of the fuel mix. However, because there is no technology yet of high capacity storage, they need to be balanced by conventional energy, either gas or coal. um, Removing one of these fuels would mean that the other will have basically a monopoly on the market, which will increase the electricity prices, and that will lead to energy poverty. Energy poverty, I think, when you talk about it, you think about countries like India or like in Indonesia. However, there is energy poverty in Europe as well. For example, a study show that in the United Kingdom, because of because of energy poverty, there are about 31,000 deaths per year, because people cannot afford the electricity bill, so they reduce the electricity, leading to illnesses. What This is why I think that it's important to have affordable prices as well for the households, but also for the industry. Um, However, this has to be done in a way that protects the environment, because we're like a big ship, making circles around the sun. And it's important to preserve this environment that we have in a sustainable way. What we do in the coal mining sector is, for example, land recultivation. This is very important. We have a local community that asks us what to do with the mine. We don't just leave a hole there. Some communities ask us to build a forest, and for that we introduce plants, we introduce animals, even endangered species. For example, in a coal mine in Germany, we added about 700 species of endangered animals. So we support actively this part, and policymakers recognize the expertise that we have in this field. Other communities want, for example, a lake, and we build a lake where the mine was. Or most of the time, communities just want farmland, and they are actually very happy with that, because the land is very flat, and that helps agriculture. So we just don't leave there a hole, with like moon landscape. This is the mining part. In the burning of the fuel, what we do now is we worked a lot on the problems that are noticed with the coal burning. Now our biggest problem is CO2, and over years the coal industry showed that it can deliver. It was a problem with dust. We put filters. It was a problem with CO2. We put desulfurizers. Now it's CO2. And if the industry is given time and is given trust, we can solve this problem too. Ignoring, saying that coal has to disappear is not a solution, because countries in the world are building more coal-fired power plants, and not only in developing countries like China, but also in countries like Japan, in countries like Australia, even the United States. There is a humongous coal share in the power mix. In Europe, we have a lot of coal-fired power plants built in Germany, in Poland, but also in the Netherlands. A country like Denmark has almost half of their electricity provided by coal. So there is a lot of coal in Europe, and simply ignoring it and coal has to disappear is not a solution. What we should do is invest in CO2 reducing technology. CCS is a solution. It reduces 90%, But a new coal-fired power plant, it can reduce CO2 emissions by almost by a quarter or even more. And this is important because it will be maybe the cheapest and the quickest way to reduce CO2 emissions. And simply, some countries simply don't afford the high capex needed to build other type of electricity suppliers, like nuclear, for example. But with coal, because it's affordable, because it's easy to technologically, it's easy to build, it's reliable. Countries want that, they think about it, and what we can do, particularly in Europe, is use the expertise of the European coal utilities, coal companies, and help the developing countries to build coal power plants with better technologies, reducing CO2 emissions. For example, there is a power plant I think in the region of Kosovo, which Kosovo has enormous coal reserves, and they're using that. But because there is no financing to refurbish the old power plant, that power plant, it has very high CO2 emissions. That part of the world doesn't have any other energy resources. For them, gas is too expensive. They don't have hydro. They don't have they don't have enough money for nuclear. So they have very large resources of coal, of lignite, and they burn that in a very old power plant from the 60s. Of course, in the 60s they didn't thought about CO2 emissions. It wasn't a problem back then, but now, for example, a coal-fired power plant like this should be financed internationally to reduce emissions. I think if that power plant there is refurbished, it can reduce CO2 emissions by like 40%. It's enormous. And it will also deliver reliable energy for the people there. I think this is an important point, that ignoring and saying, coal doesn't exist, should disappear, is not a solution.
You saw that issue with coal funding come to the fore again yesterday when Bank of America announced that they were deciding to no longer finance coal. There's been a series of announcements like that in recent years, and it seems to be part of a seemingly unstoppable movement aimed at keeping fossil fuels in the ground. But as you say, with the Kosovan example, I was attended a lecture recently on Botswana's coal resource. Developing countries such as Botswana, they've got coal reserves that could propel their economies forward. And if they don't capitalize on their coal resource in the cleanest way possible through being aided by finance, is that going to backfire on the drive to reduce emissions in a realistic fashion? But on the contrary, there are those that argue that the world ought to compensate countries such as Botswana or Kosovo for keeping their coal in the ground. In 50 years or 100 years, is that necessarily going to be, if the movement to keep fossil fuels in the ground is serious, is this a realistic thing to expect, or are these countries simply going to build coal power plants anyway, regardless of what happens?
Yeah, I think this is a very good question, a very good observation. It's a delicate point, because who doesn't want a better environment? Who doesn't want a cleaner air? Who doesn't want, I don't know, free internet, a world without diseases? But that comes with a cost. And I think where is a demand, there are countries who want reliable electricity for their citizens. There will be a supply, and there are countries who provide financing, or institutions who provide financing for those countries that want to build coal power plant. For example, in no further than in the European Union, in Romania, because it was difficult to find the financing with the European institutions. They found financing with Chinese investors, and now the power plants there are refurbished with Chinese financing, and I think Chinese technology. Also, the same is with Japan. Japan is helping many countries to build coal-fired power plants. And these are just a few examples of countries or institutions that provide financing for coal-fired power plants. Keeping the fossil fuels in the ground, it's a noble goal, but what is the alternative? So, okay, we will not use any more oil. So how will we fuel our cars with electricity? And the electricity comes from where? It's always a balance. And until we don't have a technology that can provide an alternative, we cannot say let's make them disappear, because it's easy to destroy, but it's difficult to provide an alternative. Yes, I agree. Okay, let's keep fossil fuels in the ground, but what is the alternative? What do we give? How when we go to work and we open our computer, we expect to open our computer and to start working. When we turn on our switch on our lights, we expect to have light. This is now taken as granted, which is normal. It's a basic necessity of a modern economy, and it shouldn't disappear without a realistic alternative. We cannot guess technology. It's tempting to say we'll invest a lot in a specific fuel, and in 20 years' time we'll have very good electricity prices or very good prices from this technology. But technology cannot be guessed. We cannot guess what will happen in 30 years. We cannot guess what technology will appear. That comes over time, and it's usually decided by market.
Okay.
It's very noble and it's very good that there are people asking and wanting a better environment, but you cannot destroy without offering an alternative.
Yeah. I mean, some of those alternatives are being developed and financed. I mean, we spoke a lot about developing countries, but the developed world, like European Union countries or North American, I suppose what's happening in places like Germany now is they're trying to introduce a tax on coal-fired power plants. And, I mean, I suppose that at the end of the day, it's the consumer that will have to pay a lot of money in order to achieve this utopic goal. And I'm just thinking, is it? I mean, I suppose people who are interested in putting the planet's health, prioritizing it, maybe sometimes they can't see what they're trying to do is make a whole generation sacrifice for that goal right now. When realistically, if they looked at it with a bigger perspective, maybe they can see that it's. I mean, I'm looking at Germany, and I'm the German citizen, and the price of electricity there, and I'm just interested in your perspective on that.
I think there is more awareness now in the Commission and generally at the European institutions that electricity prices are important, that one of the advantages of Europe is the manufacturing sector. And for them, the electricity is important. Some countries still think how to improve the environment, but at some point the bill comes that we have to pay, and for all this support for other fuels. I think the best way is to leave the market decide, with, of course, having the environment requirements. Unfortunately, in Europe, we have very high electricity prices, and there are studies, and the European Parliament noticed that there is a carbon leakage. And I think many policymakers are starting to realize that in Europe we still have very high unemployment. There are people, particularly for young people. Let's not forget that in countries like Spain or or Greece, half of the working population of young people are still looking for a job. This is a huge social bomb that we have to realize. And those people, they want a job. They need to gather experience for work. They want to have a family, and they cannot have a family without earning any income. We have to think about them as well. It's important to protect the environment, but this should not come at the cost of an entire generation. And I think I'm really a big enthusiast of European values, of free speech, scientific inquiry, consumer protection, free markets. And I think Europe should offer a model for developing countries. But if why if I'm a developing country, why should I follow an entity which doesn't grow economically, which has huge unemployment, and where the industry is leaving?
Yeah.
Why should I follow this kind of model? Because this is what Europe is now. I should do like other countries, like China, because they are growing, they are putting millions of people out of poverty. Why should I do that? I think this is why Europe has a responsibility in this sense as well, and the policymakers has a responsibility uh, in this sense as well. And also, I think it's a mistake to try to determine which is the energy mix in a country, because each country usually uses their own resources. If you have a lot of hydro, you use a lot of hydro, it makes sense. If you have gas, you use gas, it makes sense. If you have coal, use coal, it makes sense. And every country in the world uses this basic logic. In Europe, we don't have a lot of gas. We have some in the North Sea, but it's starting to decline. What we have instead in Germany, for example, it's a lot of coal. Eight of our energy resources in Europe are in the form of coal. And to give you an image how that means, we have basically the same energy resource as Saudi Gawar field in Saudi Arabia. So for hundreds of years, it's not 30 years, 50 years, 100 years. For for 200 years, 100, I calculated it's 156 years with current technology. And of course, the technology will improve in time. And with current prices, they're very low for coal. Having a tax on a specific fuel is, choosing the energy mix in a country, and that will create, if you are chosen, and you don't need to compete, you don't need to improve your technology, you need to improve your energy or your environmental requirements. You don't progress if there is no competition. I think it should be a free competition on the energy market, and we should all compete and see who has the better prices, protecting the environment and respecting the environmental rules.
Okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, what you seem to be speaking about is, I mean, if there is policy makers getting too involved and not letting markets do their work, that it can get out of balance, and that coal has to be part of the solution, part of the balance. I mean, in recent decades, coal has done a lot in terms of innovating cleaner coal technologies. I mean, judging by its record in recent decades in improving its ability to tackle some of the, I suppose, problems it had in terms of emissions. I mean, if it's done how are we looking at in terms of timescales, considering the innovations that have already been done? Is there much more room for improvement over the next 50 to 100 years in clean coal technology?
Yes, if given time, and we continue at this rate, there will be bigger reductions in CO2 emissions, and I think uh, this breakthroughs most likely will come, because there is a lot of place. We just started to look at CO2 emissions. And some countries, don't care about this. All they want is efficiency, uh, or how to burn cheaper. We in Europe, we look also at CO2 emission. We look also at flexibility. Uh, we try to balance the renewables. So we have power plants which are extremely flexible. They can go in 15 minutes, 800 degrees. They can really match everything in terms of demand. We are doing these efforts, but if no, we start divesting and we start ignoring and we start uh, shaming coal that it should disappear, it's not a solution. We cannot turn a blind eye of what is happening. Um, Coal is investing a lot in research. For example, here in the office, I spend half of my time doing statistic and data and collecting information, less, talking about how good coal is.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly, the coal industry is made of engineers and miners. It's not very much of lobbying and of thinking, how good we are.
Yeah.
Which, for example, I think is a disadvantage because the coal industry has many good stories, many extraordinary examples uh, of providing good, affordable electricity and recultivating the land, leaving as it was before, as the local community wants. And I regret that these stories are not said more broadly or more often. For example, we have a coal power plant in Slovenia, I think, and the old power plant was destroyed, and a new one was built in the same place, so without any infrastructure costs. And the new power plant has, I think, 33% less CO2 emissions. So in
Mm-hmm.
5 years' time, or in 4 years' time, how was when the new coal-fired power plant was built? It was one third less CO2 emissions very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just building a new one. Uh, Building new power plants means also new experience, new research done, new ways to understand how to use less CO2 emissions.
Mm-hmm.
What we can do is help countries that want to build coal-fired power plants, no matter the risks, uh, helping them to build with better technology in terms of CO2 emissions.
We'll get around to carbon capture and storage in a minute, but I mean, what would you say to those people who criticize coal-fired power and say that, you know, that all these financial institutions now that have over the last years no longer be funding coal? How would you react when they say that, well, maybe the funding will now go to solar, or even maybe governments will free up funding for nuclear, and that those technologies ultimately are the horses that they should back if they need to get on top of the CO2 problem, and that coal, for all those noble things that you said about how it's improving its abilities, and how big a resource it is worldwide, and how cheap it can be, and how important it is to both developing and developed countries. I mean, you're still going to have that mindset that says, well, why not use that funding, and why not prioritize cleaner technologies? And how would you respond to that?
Well, I think that new technologies have to be funded, have to be supported. But
Hmm.
we support some of these technologies since the 70s, so 50 years now. And at some point they have to compete on the free market. They
Hmm.
cannot be forever supported, forever have feed-in guaranteed tariffs. At some point they have to, this support for them has to be led to the free market, because the in terms of and this is better for their technology as well, because if you are supported, if you have guaranteed feed-in tariffs, you're not incentivized to improve your technology and make it cheaper or make it better and make it more affordable. What you're incentivized is to build more. more and more with the same technology, and you're not incentivized to build better. And in a way, because of the hardships that we have now in the coal industry, I think what we are doing now, the research that our scientists and our engineers are doing, is really impressive. This is why I think that indeed young technologies have to be supported, have to be invested. There is a lot of talk about fusion technology now. That should be supported, but you cannot let some technologies being supported forever. They are since the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and now there is continuous support. We cannot let this forever.
Okay.
About CCS, it's a very interesting technology. Actually, this year, I think just a few months ago, the first commercial coal-fired power plant with CCS was opened in Canada. I think at Boundary Dam, if I'm not wrong. Well, for me, this is a bit surprising because I know that European policymakers were saying that Europe is leading in the fight against climate change, but I see the Canadians are ahead of us.
Yeah.
So this creates an advantage for the utility there and for the technology there, because if you build one, you have the experience. I can do it better next time. You see your mistakes, you see how you can improve, and there is an economy of there's a learning curve that you can use, and I think they have an advantage. And if I think there is now a big push. Many policymakers want changes related to in their policy related to climate change and better environmental requirements. In the same time, as data shows, there is also a huge demand for coal. Coal is increasing. So how do you match those two things? You need a technology for CO2 emissions to capture them. It seems that the Canadians are the first one in this field, and I think now it's also in the States. They are close to finish one, if I'm not wrong.
Okay. Yes, I mean they have one in Kemper County in Texas, but that's come up against some problems in terms of I suppose it's something you'd more commonly associate with nuclear in that it's gone completely. Well, some nuclear projects anyway, not all. But it's gone way over budget and it's costing the Texan taxpayer quite a bit of money, as far as I know. I mean, I suppose that is the thing with new technologies. There's going to be some financial pain to go through, but I mean, it seems to be over budget and way over schedule as well. I mean, I'm just wondering what you think of that, and also, I suppose in recessionary Europe, it's quite difficult for us to come up with the finance for such projects. I mean, I know in Britain, in Peterhead, that planning application is in the pipeline at the moment. But I mean, in terms of overall costs and even, I suppose, in terms of the technology, is it versatile enough? I mean, in Canada, it's linked with the oil sands, and it seems to be a sort of a mutually beneficial situation for the oil companies up there. I mean, it must. I mean, obviously in the North Sea, it could be a winner, but I mean, where do you stand on that? I mean, is it realistic for Europe? I mean, I know it seems to be on its infancy stage in America, and it does. I mean, obviously, as you say, there is signs now that it is going to be. It could possibly be a solution worldwide, and I know in Europe that they do pay a lot of lip service towards it, even still.
Yes, I think it's as you were saying, there is one project in England, I think at White Rose. What is interesting about CCS is that it's not used only by the coal industry or even only by the energy sector. it's also needed for the steel industry, because they are emitting CO2 as well, and not just a little. Also for cement industry, for fertilizers, chemical industry, they are CO2 emitters as well. And this technology can be used for a range of sectors. And I think if the burden is shared, the costs are not that high. Of course, being the first of its kind, it's normal to have some over budget issues, but over time, learning from mistakes, the cost will go down. I'm sure that the first coal-fired power plants were a bit over budget because they were the first of their kind. But over time, the cost will reduce. What is interesting about CCS or CCU is that it can use on a range of sectors. When we talk a lot about CO2, but coal is not the only one emitting. No, gas is emitting as well. Steel industry is emitting as well. Chemical industry is emitting as well. Cement, aluminium, uh, fertilizers, and several other industries are CO2 emitters as well. Uh, kind of sniping one sector and said, no, we'll close you because you're emitting too much. It's a bit childish. It's not making any sense. There are many sectors who are emitting CO2, and if you are really decided to do something, we'll work on a solution.
Okay.
The transport sector is emitting significant CO2 emissions, but they are not under any focus.
Okay. Yeah, just to wrap up now, Mike, thank you for your comments so far. In 100 years' time, coal is going to be as much a part of the solution as it is now, despite its opponents. Possibly, you could argue being one-eyed about it and saying that coal should no longer be part of the power generation mix. But you envisage it being maybe not as I suppose as dominant as it has been, but yet still having quite a big part to play in the global power future.
Yes, looking at what is happening now in terms of coal demand and coal-fired power plants construction and permits, and how many people are in energy poverty, I think this until we find a better technology, this will be part of the energy mix. Even if the economics will be against, it's still a very reliable and very simple technology to use. There are important reserves of energy in forms of coal, and countries will decide for various arguments, one or another, to use them. Even if maybe it is economics, maybe it is energy independence, maybe it is reliability, maybe it is I don't know, energy poverty, I don't know. But there are many arguments for a country. Each of these arguments big enough for a country or a region or a utility to use coal-fired power plants.
Okay. Mike, thanks very much. You can access this Google Hangout on Power Engineering International's website. You can also go on LinkedIn, where we're going to host a discussion on today's topic and or today's perspective from coal-fired power. Over the coming season, we're going to have contributions from other power generation technologies. But for today, I'd like to thank Mike Bostan for a fantastic inaugural Power Engineering International Google Hangout. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for inviting me.
Great. See you now.
Bye.